Hello, everyone, and welcome to our birth story webinar. We're going to get started soon. My name is Sam, ICAN VP, and I'll hand the floor over to Anastasia.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. It's our first webinar of Cesarean Awareness Month, so pretty appropriate that we're starting with birth stories, which is super sweet. I'm the current president of ICAN, but I'll be sharing today, so I'm just talking right now, and then I will be a story. We're super grateful that you're here, and the webinar is going to be recorded. So hopefully we will get it loaded up to the website after it's over so you can share it with other people who might be encouraged by just hearing different stories. And we don't have endless time, but we tried to bring you guys a variety of stories today that took lots of different paths, just like life does. And then we can all walk away with some just nuggets of information so that you can walk away feeling more empowered to make autonomous choices as you walk through life. Yeah, I think that's all I have. Oh, the chat will be open. You can ask questions, and we've got Valerie, one of our board members and the chapter director, she'll be monitoring it to answer and at the end of all the stories, we will do some question and answer time. There is a strong possibility we won't get through all the questions, but we will do our best to answer lots of questions. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Okay, Sam, whenever you're ready, I think we could start going.
Well, welcome, everyone. I want to start off with some introductions. Just everybody say who you are, kids you have, any other nuggets you'd like to add. Raquel, did you want to go first?
Sure. So my name is Raquel and I'm from Santa Barbara. I don't know what I'm supposed to tell you guys about myself, but I'm a doula. And I had a breech home birth after 3 cesareans. And so that'll be my story for later.
Anastasia?
I already introduced myself a little bit, but I'm Anastasia, and I had 2 C-sections. They were both unplanned, and one was after a TOLAC attempt. And so that's the story I will be sharing later. I also live in Santa Barbara, California, but I had my babies in Santa Cruz, California.
Ryan?
I'm Mariah Gerber. I'm in Hayward, Wisconsin, which is basically by Lake Superior, way north. I'm a mom of 3, and my story today is actually of my 3rd baby that I was trying to do a VBAC and life just had other plans. So,
Erin.
I'm Erin. I'm from Central Illinois, and I had a VBAC as a surrogate. And I am also currently serving as the ICAN treasurer.
Erin, since we left off on you, why don't we start off asking you some questions? Can you tell us about your first birth?
So I had an easy pregnancy with my daughter. I have one daughter, my husband and I. And so I am a structural engineer. In addition to my job as a structural engineer, I also taught yoga classes when I was pregnant and for several years before that. So I stayed pretty active throughout my whole pregnancy. I saw a midwife for my pregnancy care, and I didn't have any issues with my pregnancy at all until I went past my due date. I wasn't really planning. I mean, I was not surprised that I went past my due date, and I wasn't really worried about it, considering I was pretty sure my due date was a little bit off because I was tracking my ovulation and I calculated my due date was a couple days later than the clinic had calculated it as. So there's that. And you know, I proudly showed them my fertility chart when I went to my first appointment, and they pretty much ignored it. But yeah, so I was born 2 weeks late when I was born, so I was not really surprised that I was overdue. And I didn't recall any possibility of induction. I don't recall any mention of it until I went to my 41-week checkup on Friday, June 5th. And my midwife said that my baby was suddenly at a high risk of stillbirth and safer out than in, and she scheduled an induction for me on Monday. I'd scheduled my work leave to start right at 40 weeks, so I was already off for a week taking vacation time, and I was about to run out of vacation time, but FMLA wasn't going to kick in until the baby was actually born, so I was, you know, stressed about that, and now all of a sudden my baby was in danger, according to my midwife. So I was just kind of shocked and surprised, and I didn't ask a whole lot of questions at that appointment. And I didn't really have much information except that I had an 8 a.m. induction appointment, and I was just hoping I would go into labor over the weekend. I didn't know anything about induction. So I went to my typical yoga class on Saturday morning as a participant, but I had no signs of labor over the weekend. So on Monday morning, kind of disappointed, my husband and I went to the hospital, and my dilation was checked when I checked into the hospital, and I was barely fingertip dilated and 50% effaced on admission. And I had Cervidil, and then I had Foley bulb, and then I had Pitocin, and it was just a typical cascade of intervention. I had an epidural and my Pitocin, they kept upping it, and it basically became pit to distress, because my baby started having non-reassuring fetal heart tones, and I had a fever, and I was rushed to the OR for an urgent C-section. So I went to the hospital on Monday morning at 8 a.m. It was Wednesday just after 10 a.m. that I was rushed to the OR. So it had been a while. My daughter was born at 10:12 a.m. on June 10th. So she was held up for me to see, but then she had meconium aspiration, so she was taken to the NICU. And then I was stitched up and sent to a recovery room. And I finally got to see my baby a little after midnight that night. And she stayed in the NICU for about 5 days. And then she finally got to come into the room with me. And then we got to go home. So it was definitely not what I had planned.
No, not at all what you had planned. And so how did you know that VBAC was an option after your C-section, after going through all that?
So as a matter of fact, my midwife helped with stitching me up after the cesarean, and as she was doing that, she told me that because she did such a good job stitching me up, I'd be an excellent candidate for a VBAC. And I thought it was kind of insensitive because I'm an only child, my husband is an only child, we were really planning to have an only child. So it was really, you know, it seemed like my midwife didn't really know anything about me or my expectations or my family plans. And like my husband was very much only child, and he had a vasectomy about a year after our daughter was born. But that kind of offhand comment from my midwife kind of stuck with me that, oh, I'd be an excellent candidate for a VBAC, even though I didn't really want more kids.
That's so interesting. The things that people say can really impact us.
Yes. Yeah.
So what led you to attempt VBAC? Given the vasectomy and no
All
plans.
right. Yeah, we weren't really planning to have more kids. So, in the summer of 2019, so my daughter was like 4 at the time, really right around the time that she turned 4, very close to her birthday. I was driving to work and I heard an ad on the radio for the birth unit of the hospital where she was born. And it ended with the tagline, "Your birth, your way." And that just hit me And I started sobbing so hard after hearing that because it was felt so untrue. I was crying so hard that I like had to pull over, and I knew then that I had to do something to get past the trauma from my daughter's birth and that it was affecting me more than I realized. So I saw a therapist about it, and since we weren't having any more kids, I decided to pursue surrogacy to become a gestational carrier to have the opportunity to have another birth experience. And at the same time, it seemed so because I had a really great pregnancy, I actually really liked being pregnant. I thought it would be a win-win. So I could be pregnant, have another birth experience, but also give another family the gift of growing their family.
Did you go with the same provider, same hospital as before? And were the risks of both VBAC and repeat cesarean discussed at your appointments?
So I went back to the same clinic, but because I had had a cesarean now, and now being a gestational carrier, it was an IVF pregnancy, and I was also now 35. So I had several risk factors that I was no longer eligible for midwife care at my clinic. So I saw a OB with the same practice, not the OB that delivered my daughter by cesarean, but a different OB at the practice. And part of that clinic's protocol was to have a VBAC consent form. So they kind of laid out the risks and benefits of both VBAC and cesarean, but it was kind of more, these are things that will scare you into a cesarean, which I'd already done my research. So I kind of already knew the risks, and I knew where some of them were a bit exaggerated on the form. So I had no problem, signing. I accept all the risks to have a trial of labor after cesarean.
And so how was your VBAC experience?
My VBAC experience was, it was euphoric. So I again had easy pregnancy. So even though I had a whole bunch more risk factors, I was older and was IVF, and I'd had a prior cesarean. And so at my 20-week scan, the tech noticed that I may have a circumvalent placenta, but I didn't have any of the symptoms of that, which would be like bleeding or cramping or anything like that. So it wasn't really much of a concern until I had symptoms, which I never did. But this time I knew I would go late, and I knew what would happen when I went late. So I was able to be a lot more first proactive in trying to get my body going. So I did self-induction techniques, like eating dates, red raspberry leaf tea, nipple stimulation, a bunch of stuff just to try to do something, because I felt like the potential benefits of that were much more than the possible risks. But because of all my risk factors, my OB at first suggested induction at 39 weeks, and then scheduled me for induction at 39 weeks, which I canceled because I was not ready. She had thoughtfully scheduled it for me. And then I called the hospital and was like, no, I won't be there. But then because again, I was late at my 41-week appointment again, it was 41 weeks, 2 days. I kind of acquiesced to induction. This time it started at 10 p.m. instead of in the morning, it was in the evening. And I would have been 41 weeks, 3 days at the start of the induction, which was the same as the start of my induction with my daughter, according to the clinic. This time I knew my dates for sure, though, so they definitely lined up because of the IVF. And also because I'd had a previous cesarean, we didn't start with Cervidil. But when I got to the hospital, I was a solid 1 centimeter dilated. I'm like, wow, I have actual dilation this time when I'm getting there. But so we started, we were able to do a Foley bulb, and we started Pitocin at the same time as the Foley bulb. And my husband stayed at home with our daughter. It was COVID. So I was only allowed, it was in 2020. So I was only allowed 1 support person, and I had a doula. I had a big meal before I got to the hospital, and I knew what to expect of induction. I got all hooked up to the Pitocin and everything, and I went to sleep. My doula wasn't there yet, and because I knew it's gonna be a while. And you know, it was 11:30 by the time that I had gotten all hooked up and, you know, induction was going. So I actually slept fairly well, with them just coming in periodically. But then I woke up a little bit before 5 a.m., starting to feel contractions that I couldn't really sleep through anymore. So at that point, I called my doula, and I can't remember if she was there or if she was there or not, but right around 7 a.m., around the shift change time, the doctor came in to check on me and was kind of concerned that the Foley bulb was still in place because it'd been, you know, like 8 hours since they placed it. So she checked it with my consent. And as she was checking me, at the same time, it just so happened I had a contraction and the baby's heart rate dropped, and I had a trickle of fluid come out. But at that point, the doctor also noticed that I was a little bit more than 5 centimeters dilated already, and the Foley bulb should have fallen out. But she tugged on it and it was not coming out. But she noticed that the baby's head was right between the Foley bulb and my cervix. So the head, the Foley bulb was stuck behind the baby's head. And she was like pulling on the baby's head as she was pulling it out. So they had to let the water out of the Foley bulb and pull that out the rest of the way. And so then it was shift change. She left. My regular OB that I'd been seeing came in, and baby's heart rate recovered, and Foley bulb was now out. But right then my water fully broke. So labor actually got more intense. And then my OBJ just came to check in on me. She left, but I had my doula there at that time. And so I just labored for a while with my doula and the nurse, who were both in the room pretty much the whole time. I remember with my daughter, the nurse was like, she just came in, up the Pitocin, and left. She was barely there at all. But this time my doula was there and the nurse was there pretty much the whole time, and they were kind of chatting, and it was really relaxed actually. But I was laboring for a while. Around 11 a.m. Labor was getting pretty intense. I was checked. I was 7 centimeters dilated. I wanted to like sit on the toilet, but I was hooked up to wired monitors because that's what my hospital has. They're wired, not waterproof. I asked to sit on, or I asked to get into the birth tub, and I wasn't allowed to do that because I had to have the monitors on and they weren't waterproof, which I knew to expect that. So I elected, I was hoping to avoid it, but I elected to get an epidural. But this time, unlike with my daughter, when I had the epidural, I was pretty much numb from my waist down and I couldn't move at all. This time I was actually still able to move my legs when I had the epidural. So I was able to roll over from side to side, and my doula brought me the birth ball. So I was able to have the peanut ball between my legs as I rolled side to side. And after I had the epidural, I rested for a while. I kind of fell asleep. And then it was around 1 in the afternoon that I was kind of chatting and laughing with my doula. I consented for another check, and I was fully dilated. at that time. And so the nurse told me that I could start pushing. So I just kind of pushed, here and there for a while. And kind of on my side, I was pushing. And then, I don't know if I was, I didn't really know what was going on because I had the epidural, I couldn't really feel much. But then about 4 p.m., the doctor came to check on me, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of been a while. And I asked her how much longer she thought it would be. And she was like, well, I can kind of feel the head right there. And she asked if I wanted a mirror so I could see. And I asked for that. And, but when she was checking me, she noticed that while the baby's head was right there, it was slightly asynclitic. So probably from pulling against the baby's head with the Foley bulb, I'm thinking maybe, because she was able to adjust it. And then I was laying on my back at that point, which also not exactly what I wanted, but I had the epidural, and I'm like, I kind of really want the baby to be born, so I'm just going to do what they say. And so after a couple more good pushes with contractions, I was able to push the baby out at 4:16 p.m. and it was December 31st, 2020.
Wow.
So she was a 2020 baby, just by the
Just
name.
under the wire.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah,
Is there,
but she was totally healthy and is able to go straight with her parents.
that's great.
Yes.
Is there any advice you would give to people who are pregnant and about having an empowering birth? Something euphoric like what you experienced.
Yeah. So I would recommend, I highly recommend a doula. I probably would have been in a better position with my first birth if I had a doula that would have told me what being induced meant, that I wouldn't have been able to labor in the tub if I was induced, that it might take days, especially if I had an unfavorable cervix and, some options that could help with labor. I naively assumed that seeing a midwife would automatically mean I would get the midwife model of care, but having a midwife at a clinic associated with a hospital, that wasn't necessarily the case. And there was kind of a disparity between my expectations and her assumptions. And I've always been a rule follower, but kind of to have that positive birth experience, I had to, defy authority, and I had to find support to defy authority, because was very much against my nature. So just really finding the support that you need to speak up for yourself and do what it takes.
Finding your voice.
Yes, find your voice.
Speaking of finding a voice, Mariah, do you want to tell us a little bit about your first two births? Because you sure found your voice in your last birth.
Yeah. So, yeah, to get to the last one, I kind of have to start at the first. So my daughter was my first, typical new mom, very similar to Erin. Trusted my doctor. She was good. However, I was in a very small rural hospital. 40 weeks came and went. 41 weeks came and went. And they, were going to do medical intervention to induce me. Didn't know what that meant. Showed up at the hospital at 6 a.m., went home at noon, came back next day, same thing, went home. 4 days of that. Finally, my water finally broke. And after a very, very long labor, because it was kind of, I don't have the medical terms that you guys do. I'm a banker, I'm in finance, so I have no medical terms, so bear with me here. I was medically induced, so my contractions were kind of fake and I wasn't getting anywhere. So my water had broken and I wasn't even dilated, which I don't even know how that happens, but I can tell you my water broke. So it was a really, really long labor. Ended with a beautiful baby girl, had a meconium scare, everything was okay. She was like an 8 on the APGARD, so we got really lucky there. 8 hours later, I started hemorrhaging. And luckily I had just a good old fashioned family doctor who took care of, 90-year-olds to newborns to pregnant women. And she knew what to do and she acted super quickly. Um, with all that, it was kind of just a whirlwind. You have a daughter, you're thankful for that, you move on. But looking back at that, I had this one nurse that every time, I swear, she just touched me and it took the pain away. And if anyone, if you have a labor without an epidural, whoever can do that is like a savior. And so I called and I asked about her and I said, "Who was this nurse?" And they're like, "Well, she was a doula." And I was like, "What's a doula?" So I did my research and I found out what a doula is. And then, along with that, I did a deep dive into everything that didn't go right in that pregnancy, what all the inductions were, what the drugs were, what all those things I signed were, what they actually were meant to do. Um, so, I read everything. I focused on my healing. I focused on my recovery. So we tried for our second. We were blessed to get pregnant quickly. Um, I was an avid CrossFitter, working out, so I continued all that. I had super easy pregnancies, didn't mind being pregnant, felt great, everything was great. Just had a sucky delivery. So I was like, well, this second one's going to be great. So I found Diana. I had decided I was going to a larger hospital, not a larger hospital, but I was going to a bigger city, a different hospital where if I did have that hemorrhaging, because when I told people about that, they're like, you were really lucky. Like that could have gone a different direction. So I decided to go to somewhere that could better suit if something happened or went wrong. So that meant driving an hour, which just is what it is when you live in the middle of nowhere. So 40 weeks came and went again. I was doing all of the things, the dates, the raspberry, the miles movements, the stepping on sidewalks, the stairs. I mean, literally everything you could read, I tried it. Probably some things I shouldn't have, um, but I was in a much different spot, I think, this time at 40 weeks because I had my doula, both emotionally, physically, and mentally. I was so much more prepared. I wasn't crawling out of my skin, all those feelings that come with that in between. It's just mentally exhausting. Um, so, sorry, trying to keep track of where I'm at here so I don't ramble, but it's not working. So I was trusting the process. I was letting things happen, letting it go. Finally went into labor one night, texted Diana, my doula. At this point, we were in 2022. I don't know my dates as well. So we were still in COVID where they were testing. So unfortunately, Diana had tested positive for COVID. So when I went into labor, at another labor or something, I'm not really sure the details. So she was unable to attend my birth because of her days on quarantine and the hospital rules. So she found a sub doula for me, Emily, who would meet me at the hospital. And this would be my husband's first time meeting Emily. But I trusted anyone who could be a doula at this point. And I trusted Diana. So I knew I was in good hands. I left. My water had broke at home. My contractions were regular. We got in the car. We drove an hour. By the time we got there, I was making my husband go 80 miles an hour because my contractions were 5 minutes apart and extremely painful sitting in a car. So instead of being welcomed and ushered into this hospital, which I had called and told them, we were on our way, we were an hour out. I was told that they were full and that they didn't have room for me. And I was like, okay, well, I just drove an hour, so I don't really know where you want me to go at this point. Like, I'm clearly in labor. So they put me in a room on this floor. The lights were literally off on the entire floor. There was no one there. And they just left. And they didn't believe me that my water had broken. So they had to test it first before they would even fully admit me to the hospital. And otherwise they were going to have to transfer me to another hospital an hour away. And if there's anything that can offend a mom or a woman is telling her that she doesn't know her water broke as you're in labor. And so I was extremely upset. probably being a little bit rude to them at this point of time because I was mad. Well, surprise, my water did break. I knew it, so they had to admit me, which I knew this. Thanks to research and my doula, my husband was texting her. So they had to admit me, they couldn't transfer me. We were still had to wait for a room, and we were still waiting for my doula to arrive because Emily was coming from either further than Diana to meet me. So as they were getting me hooked up, you know, getting me in the room, all that fun stuff that goes with all that, I knew I was going to have to be, you know, we had talked about if I wanted to, you know, have a line and be hooked up and all that stuff. So we were going through that, and baby's heart rate dropped. They just got baby connected, and baby's heart rate dropped suddenly, and it continued to. And this part gets kind of a little blurry for me, but there was so much commotion, and I was bawling. Everyone was yelling. Emily arrived right kind of in the middle of this commotion, the doula, to complete chaos. I had, you know, meeting my husband for the first time, and what felt like maybe a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, the doctor literally yelled, called it, pushed me back on the bed, and it was just like a movie. You know, there was no goodbyes, there was no love yous. I was being wheeled onto a bed into the brightest room I've ever seen in my life. It was like a movie screen. At this point, I had like a gown on, but I still had my own bra on and shorts on. All that got ripped off of me. Someone was trying to get a monitor on baby's head vaginally, which is very uncomfortable. Someone else was trying to prep my back for an epidural. Everyone's shouting. At the same time, remind you, I'm still having contractions every 2 minutes. I'm fully in full on labor here. Then they realized that no one had my weight. No one knew if I was allergic to anything. No one knew if I had been tested for COVID because they kind of made me mad about testing me for my breaking my water. So I knew my rights, and I refused the COVID test. And in that matter, they had to stop and pause and gown up because they didn't know any of this information about me. Remind you, I'm laying naked in a room with a million bright white lights with 20 different strangers having contractions on a boarded table that's like this wide that I can't even fit on, and I'm not a large person. So that was fun. You know, during this time, they kept giving me stingers, and every stinger, you know, your legs shoot up and you're still having contractions. And at that moment, that same doctor yelled, put her out, pushed me down again. And the last thing I remember is the anesthesiologist, who I probably should have been mad at because he was the one who kept giving me the stingers, but he was the sweetest man on the earth. And he gently rubbed my head and he said, it's all going to be okay. And I said, tell my husband I love him, because I thought I was going to die. Sorry. It's only been a year, so I feel that trauma.
It's okay.
Still, but needless to say, I made it, obviously. And I woke up in a different room, not knowing where I was. Didn't even realize that I had a child. I was so out of it, as you are when you come on anesthetic for anything, but I hemorrhaged again severely, to the point that I wasn't waking up. So my husband in this meantime was left with Emily and a newborn baby for about 3 hours by himself. Then no one was answering what was going on with me. So long story short, I got out of there as fast as I possibly could, because I was so mad at everyone from the second I got in that hospital to the second I got out. The first thing they did was yell at me because I took off my mask to sneeze as I was walking out of the hospital. No wheelchair after a C-section, no nothing. And instead of walking down the, and I know it was COVID, I understand that. We're walking out of the hospital, my husband's carrying the baby, I'm clearly struggling. And the doctor walking at me yells at me for not having a mask on. Not congratulations, not can we get you a wheelchair. it just that, and it was just an awful experience. With my severe hemorrhaging, I was told, you know, to go on an iron pill, all this stuff, and just, that was it. That was the end. So luckily with my fitness background, I also had some nutrition background. So I didn't do that for personal reasons. I ate liver. I did everything I could, the most natural way I could. And I called my doctor and I said, hey, are you going to retest my iron and, you know, my levels and see where I'm at? Because when I left the hospital, I was at a 5 on a hemoglobin. And they said, oh, no, you're fine. Just take your iron pills. And I was like, excuse me, I can't even get up. I can't even attend to my other child. I am so dead. I can't even function. So I found another doctor. I found a direct primary care physician, who had a lot of the same views as me, a lot of different views, but was super open to just talking. So I went with her. We worked through this. Everything was great. I didn't realize I was having any of these feelings, actually. I was just mad, and probably looking back on it, had everything that a mom has, the postpartum, all that stuff, but I didn't know it at the time because I'm a very type A person, and that doesn't happen, right? That's just feelings. I was fine. Needless to say, I broke down to Diane on the phone in a call, my doula postpartum, and she you know, basically just told me that something I couldn't admit to myself, that it was okay to be mad about what happened and still thankful that I had a healthy baby. Two things could happen at the same time. So we talked about it. We talked a lot. I talked to my husband about it because, you know, he didn't understand what was going on. So I talked to everyone. I just told everyone. I said, I'm pissed. I'm so pissed. I have a healthy baby. I'm healthy. He's healthy, but I'm mad. So you know, I was working through that 6 months postpartum, which is nothing. I find out I'm pregnant again, very unplanned. And I was scared to death for my own life, for my kids. And I was so mad that I wasn't happy to be pregnant, because I had friends who, you know, have been blessed with people like Aaron, who had to go the surrogate route, and there's people like wonderful people like that. I had friends that were working through IVF. I had all these people around me that were trying so hard to be pregnant, and here I'm crying because I'm pregnant. So it was just a lot of emotions to work through. And I called Diana right away again, and I said, I can't do it. And she's like, well, we can try for feedback. You're a great candidate. I'm like, so we went through all that. I had a great, easy pregnancy, worked through all that, got excited again. We found out it was a boy. So we were having 2 boys 14 months apart. My husband basically was ecstatic, to say the least. Healthy pregnancy, 40 weeks comes and goes again. Again, I was mentally and physically prepared for it. 41 weeks came and went. We did the test that, you know, to check their fluids and things like that, you know, the ultrasounds, all that stuff. Baby's fluid was running low. So they wanted to schedule an induction. And with my previous induction with my daughter, I said, I'm not doing that again. I didn't have all the same options because I was a VBAC. So I didn't have all the same options anyways. And I said, I'm not doing that, because if that goes wrong, I know where I'm ending up, and I can't do that again. So that was a hard no for me.
You wanted
So
to
I
be
just
in control.
yeah, I needed the control. I just kept trying that I was, you know, gonna go into labor. So it was almost that 42-week mark. We scheduled a planned cesarean with Diana and my doctor. I found a new hospital in the meantime. It was kind of a hybrid. It was really cool, actually. I had my direct primary care physician 20 minutes away. I had a hospital 2 hours away with Diana and a family care practitioner. My family care practitioner worked with the direct primary care practitioner. I saw my family care practitioner twice. All my other appointments were done with my direct primary care. So at 38 weeks, she fully transferred me over to my family doctor, and then all my appointments with my family doctor. However, she could not do a cesarean. So she knew my history, she knew my story, she knew the trauma, and that I would be triggered again. Especially just the hormones, natural hormones, being pregnant, being postpartum, and I never really, fully got my postpartum or any of that stuff. So there was a lot going on. She found an OB who had been there for years at Sacred Heart Hospital, which unfortunately is no longer here in Wisconsin. It's just hospitals and labor and deliveries are closing. He was amazing. I don't even know how really this all happened. I'm so thankful to Diana for giving me a voice and I had my absolute no's, and I knew what those were. And I knew if I said no, they had to listen to me, whether I was right or wrong. I don't have a doctorate, but I knew they had to pause and stop. So we planned with this OB. My husband was there, Diana was there. We had our own music, so I bawled the entire 2-hour drive down on a Monday morning to get there at 11 a.m. or whatever it was. I bawled my eyes out. I did not want to have a C-section. I just kept praying I was going to go into labor spontaneously in the car and everything was going to be great. It didn't happen. I calmed myself down by the time I got to the hospital. We, got ready. I met this surgeon who was going to be cutting me open for the first time. My existing doctor was there. We all agreed that if baby was healthy, I could do skin to skin right away. Baby would not leave at all. The OB agreed that if keeping the cord attached as long as possible is really important to me. He agreed that he would keep cord attached and baby on me until the very last second he possibly could. And then he explained to me why he couldn't do it for more than 2 minutes, because the body couldn't be exposed to air, and that was, increased your risk of infection. And just him taking the time to explain the whys when I wanted this, it just made all the difference. I was like, yeah, I don't want to get infected either. Makes sense. So let's, meet in the middle. He agreed. It was just totally different experience. So I walked back by myself to get my epidural, spinal tap, whatever you want to call it, with Diana, but I was walking. There was no cart. There was no rush. I slowly walked back. It was really triggering. We worked through it. Diana was able to sit right next to me while I was on the table while the anesthesiologist did the spinal tap. That was the hardest moment because that was the last thing I remembered. So I was sitting up, I got it. It went in, they said it worked, and there's just kind of like a relief that fell over me at that moment. They put you on the boarded table, the little surgical table. They laid me down. I got the option of a cloth or a clear cloth. I chose a cloth that I could not see. However, I did not want my arms strapped because that was so traumatizing to me, being laid down and just opened. And I've already had 2 kids at this point. So, I mean, there's nothing that no one hasn't seen, but I just couldn't do it. And they agreed that my arms did not have to be strapped. I just had to be very cognizant of the cords and all of that. And I said, yep. The OB gave me the option of if he wanted to talk through it, if he wanted silence, if we wanted music, what we wanted. I chose music. My husband made a playlist for me, and I think him and the resident doctor were dancing the entire time. So they were having a great time. My family doctor was in there. As long as baby was okay, he would be transferred directly to me. That is exactly what happened. And I don't know if any of you can see this photo, but it is probably the coolest photo I've ever seen. I don't know if you can, but this might not work. He literally one-handed baby over the curtain like a freaking football. I mean, the guy looked like a pro. It was kind of the coolest thing. I
Yeah,
got
the baby
to
was
hold
actually the baby was handed to you straight over the curtain.
like I'm
Nobody-
kidding you not.
nobody
He
touched the
one-handed
baby.
that thing like this and put him down. And his cord was still attached. He was directly on my chest. My arms that did have to be out like this. I got to hold him immediately. My family doctor was behind me. She did, what they could for the APGARD or whatever it is they check. I don't know. He was breathing. That's what mattered to me. He was crying. He was breathing. He was good. He was good. They were happy. We cut cord at the last second. My husband was right here. Diana was right here with some lavender talking me through things. She did all that, and I just got to hold my baby. It was bliss, and I honestly can't tell you what happened after that. I don't remember. Um, Baby was on my chest the entire time. He got his weight. I don't know. My mom kept asking me how much he weighed. I said, Mom, I have no idea. I haven't, he hasn't left my chest. I think it was maybe like 6 hours later, they finally figured it out. I was like, okay, yeah, you can take him. I think I have to like move. Um, but it was just so great. I got that moment. I got skin. I got to breastfeed. Um, it was like the most natural thing in the world. It was amazing. And it wasn't the VBAC I had in my head. It wasn't anything like that. I wouldn't necessarily call it euphoric, but it was exactly what I needed. It was the best of the three. Um, it wasn't 100% healing, but it was so great. I got my baby and I remembered it. And I was okay and he was okay. So that's my story. Sorry, I still can't make it through it, but
That's okay. We're all here crying with you. I'm telling you, we are. You were a great advocate for yourself. What things can you list out the things that you just touched on? You got an option of a clear drape.
yep.
You didn't
Yep.
have your arms pinned down. What else?
I wanted to walk back. So I'll just start. I wanted to walk back by myself, physically walk myself. Diana was with me the entire time. Most of the time,
Two
doulas,
people in the OR.
2 people in the OR and one person with me while I was getting the spinal tap because I knew that was going to be a very triggering moment for me. And Diana talked to like the head nurses, like she was reaching out before we were going down there all weekend. She was, trying to play the game of who she knew, all these things. And she just told me, you need to keep telling when you get there, you need to say the same things. So I just did. And yeah, so she was with me for the spinal tap. Then my husband was able to join. So I had 2 people with me. We had music. Plus I had the baby doctor, we called her. She was in charge of baby, which was my family doctor. She was in charge of baby. Baby was on my chest. My arms were not down. Um, the cord got to stay attached for as long as possible, for the last possible second. He said it was the last thing he was going to do was cut it. I don't remember if I got the option to cut it or not, or if my husband did. He probably did. He for sure declined. That's not his jam. But yeah, it was really full circle. And they asked if I wanted to know what baby weighed, and I said absolutely not. He's healthy, he's breathing, he's crying. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Keep him on
Yeah,
you.
so
Definitely. I think one of the best things was seeing the baby just handed straight to you. No nurse touched him before you touched him. The
no.
doctor pulled him out and he went straight into your arms.
Yeah, it's exactly how it was with my daughter. I pulled her out and up, and it was pretty much the exact same thing because I had that previous.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it was awesome. It was
That's
awesome. And
beautiful.
then one really funny tidbit. So we did decide that we were blessed with not having an issue of having children. So my husband went to get a vasectomy. I kind of gave him an ultimatum. So 2 months later, he schedules a vasectomy. He's walking out, and I can hear him talking, and he goes, well, yeah, let's go say hi to her. And I sitting there in the waiting room 2 months postpartum thinking, I do not want to meet your vasectomy doctor. And he walks up to me and he goes, hey, don't you remember him? And he says his name, and I'm looking at him like starstruck. I'm like, no, am I supposed to know who this is? Turns out it was the resident who had delivered my son 2 months prior. So it really came full circle for our family with that gentleman too. And I guess they just had a hoot in there during the vasectomy laughing at each other. So if things are supposed to work out the way they're supposed to, it definitely did for that one.
So we have that is incredible advocacy for yourself, meeting with people beforehand, getting exactly what you wanted from an experience that you may not have wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it is a choice, being able to talk to the hospital and get the things that you want out of it is really important. Standing up for yourself, telling them about your previous trauma. Those are all incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Next, let's talk to Raquel, who had also had several births that she's going to share with us. Could you share the story of your first 3 births?
Sure. So my first one, I was 19, and everything was normal and easy. I had really easy pregnancies, I think, for all of them. Until we got to 36 weeks and he was breech. And so the doctor essentially told me or scared me about having a breech baby, about how he would get stuck and how he could fall on his cord, and wouldn't recommend that I even go into labor. Told me that there was a doctor 45 minutes away who could deliver a breech baby, but by then I had already been terrified of my baby dying, the way the doctor explained to me. So I said, well, no, why would I go do that? It's so risky. And he even told me, he's like, I wouldn't recommend it for my own daughter to have a breech baby. And I just said, okay, I don't have a dad. My mom, had a strained relationship. So I listened to this doctor and I just trusted him. And I said, okay, of course, I'll do whatever you say. So, I was pretty devastated. I think I had really wanted to experience labor. Like, when would I be going into labor, and how and who would be there? How would it feel? All those questions. And essentially now I was going to be told when to be there, what to wear, and how to get ready and all this stuff. And so I had him at 38 weeks to make sure that I didn't go into labor. And he said it was fine because I was gonna, once it's a C-section, always a C-section. So if I wanted more kids, it would just be super easy going. I would just get pregnant and then I would know when I was gonna have the baby. I was like, okay, great. I didn't know what else to do. I wanted my baby to be safe. So I just followed orders. There was also a VBAC ban in the hospital. So did I say that? I don't remember anymore. So it wasn't an option at all for me. I think it had just gotten started when I got pregnant with my first baby. So second baby I had, and she was head down, but because of the ban, it doesn't matter. Um, and the difference between the two I know is that with my first, when I went to the hospital, I remembered everything. I remembered, how they got me in there and they sat me on the table and I, rolled my back to get the needle in. They laid me down and I remember the lights and what they were saying. And I remembered every detail. And I remember feeling really broken when my son started to cry and I couldn't comfort him. And he was in this corner and they bring him over with the eye goop on his eyes and he's, put his cheek to cheek and then off he went to wherever. And I don't know. And my husband or my partner, I don't know, no, we weren't married at the time, left with him and I was alone as they stitched me up, and it was just like probably the most loneliest feeling I've ever felt. Um, so with my second, I don't think I realized until much later when I tried to tell my story that I remembered nothing of her birth because I think I blocked out everything. I don't remember who was there or how it felt. Like I don't remember the hospital at all. I think that was my way of protecting myself. And so that was my second. And they were 2.5 years apart, and then my husband and I split apart, and so I don't know, 10 years later-ish, I met my new husband, and he wanted babies, and before we even started really officially dating, he was like, I want kids, and I said, oh, I don't know if I want more kids. I don't want any more C-sections. So I started to do some research. I was like, okay, I think I can give you one. So we kept dating, and then ICAN panel came into town, and I was like, oh, let's go check it out. And I had also, so I have a bicornuate uterus, so my babies have a higher tendency of being breech. So in the meantime, I play roller derby. One of my teammates I had talked to her about this new boy I was seeing, and how he wants to have a baby, and I was like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm like, my baby's might be breech, and she's like, that's okay, breech is fine. I was like, no, that's super dangerous. What are you talking about? I would never. She's like, no, you should look up this doctor, and gave me the name of Dr. Stu Fishbein. And I started looking at what he was doing. I was like, oh, this is not what I was told when I was 19. I don't remember how old I was now, but um And so I was shocked because he was going to be at this ICAN panel. I was like, what chances are of me going to this ICAN panel for C-section awareness and then also, you know, the doctor for breech. So I went to the panel and I got really inspired. And I just, ever since that moment, I just kept researching on my own and kept digging and digging of like hearing stories of breech delivery and looking at it and seeing it now as more of a variation of normal and not something to be so scary. And also that VBAC was possible. I wasn't going to rupture, or, you know, the odds of that happening were so small. So we got married, and almost immediately, I think the same month, I got pregnant. I promised him I wouldn't get pregnant right away. I got off birth control when we got married, and it was instant, and we were not prepared. But I did. And so I had looked into Dr. Stu because I realized he was so close. But he was a little expensive, and we had just put money down for a mortgage, or not a mortgage, what's it called? Escrow. And so I didn't really have the funds, so I couldn't afford it. So I was going to my doctor here in town, and there's VBAC band was still there, but she said, you know, if the baby turns head down, then I'll support you for a VBAC after 2 C-sections. And I said, great. I also went to Ventura, which is where the breech doctor was, and I said, "Hey doc, like I am pregnant and I have babies and sometimes they're breech, but I've had 2 C-sections. Like, would you support me?" He's like, "Oh no, 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 I can't do that. If it was just 1 C-section, then sure, but with 2, I can't." And I was like, "All right, well, okay." So I'm back to my Santa Barbara doctor, and she was so supportive. I tried everything under the sun to change my baby's position. I had like moxibustion and acupuncture and chiropractor and standing on my head on an ironing board, like everything I could do to try and flip this baby, spinning babies. Wouldn't budge. So it was really a roller coaster of emotions and stressful because if I knew like I was so close, if I could just get you to turn head down, like I'll have this chance, and it didn't happen. So 40 weeks and I had my 3rd C-section. And now I had only promised my husband for 1 extra baby, but we were trying to decide whether we wanted maybe 1 more, and I was like, no, I don't know, but you know, it happened. So
So
I
so
had,
then so then you got pregnant with your 4th.
so I got pregnant with my 4th.
And how
Um,
did that go?
the 4th was I did a lot of educating myself on breech and VBAC between number 2 and 3. I felt like I was really ready and felt safe and confident in my decision. Between baby 3 and 4, I learned about advocacy a lot more. Um, so I went back to the Ventura doctor and I said, "Hey, I know you told me last time that I couldn't have a breech VBAC with you because I had already had 2 C-sections, but now I have 3. What do you think?" And he's like, looked at me like I was crazy. He's like, "No, why would I? No, you couldn't." He's like, "You should have come back with baby number 2." I was like, "Well, okay, we're not talking about that." And so he's like, "No, I can't." And I said, "Well, okay, I get that. But like, can you force me into C-section? Like, what if I decline?" And then he kind of like lost color in his face. And he's like, "Well, no, I can't force you into a C-section." I'm like, "Great. Will you care for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'll care for you, but like you can't tell people that I was being supportive. Like you have to go to the hospital in labor and tell them that like that I did not recommend this." And I said, "That's fine. I can do that." Great. I had a hospital option for a VBAG. But at the same time, I went to see Dr. Stu and I said, "Hey, here I am. What about now? Like we're financially, like we got our home, we were, you know, financially a little bit more stable and we could afford it this time." And I said, "What do you think?" And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely." We went through some numbers, because there aren't a lot of statistics available of after 3 C-sections. So we kind of just almost guesstimated on the small studies that were done. And I was like, "Okay, I'm okay with those odds." And so he's like, "Okay, I'll do it." And I said, "Great." And so went home, and it took me like a hot second to decide whether I wanted to have a baby at home or in the hospital. And I decided ultimately that I didn't really want to fight a hospital system in labor. So I felt safer and more supported at home. And so we went with Dr. Stu and kept the hospital doctor on call just in case. And I had Dr. Stewie. I don't know, what am I missing, Anastasia? I'm nervous now.
And so what was your experience like? What tell us about your fourth birth.
Oh man. It was, I mean, almost sort of magical. I had the most stress-free pregnancy I've ever had. Didn't matter if the baby was head down or butt first. The baby was gonna come out and I would just be supported at home. So I didn't have to stress about turning the baby. I didn't do anything. I didn't drink any tea. I think I had dates because I worked out a lot and did a lot of heavy lifting. So my doctor was like, well, how about you just try some dates? And I was like, okay, fine. But they're really sweet, so I didn't really do a very good job. But other than that, I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to let it happen. And I was fully prepared that if things, didn't work out, I was okay if I had another C-section because at least it was under my terms. No one was telling me I had to do this, I had to do that. No one scared me into a decision. I was just ready for whatever the outcome may be, and I was okay with it. So oh right, so Dr. Stu was gonna go on sabbatical. So when I met him for my first consult, and mind you, I have been listening to his podcast for years. So I had this bond with him that he didn't really know I had for a long time. And so when he told me he was going on sabbatical, I was like, oh, that's a problem. Because you're the dude, you're the guy I've been listening to, and I trust your voice and I trust you. But he had this lady this other doctor that was working with him that had been studying under him for a while. And I said, okay, I'll meet her. I met her, Dr. Victoria Flores, and she was amazing. And I said, great, that's fine. She can be there, and I'm all excited. But my due date was my guest date was July 4th, and she was going to be on vacation. So I didn't really know if she was gonna be there, and then Stu was gonna fly in and kind of take over for her when she was gone. And so the day I went into labor, I was 41 weeks in a day. And I was at dinner with a friend, and I'm feeling this like tingling sensation in my back. I was like, oh, that's different. I've had prodromal labor for God weeks. Anastasia was my doula. So if I keep asking her questions, it's because she was with me on this journey this whole time. Um, I was feeling this tingling in my back. I said, that's different. And it would go away and then it'd come back and it'd go away. And I finished dinner and I told my friend, I said, listen, I'm gonna go home. I'm not sure I'm gonna see you for a while. I might have a baby today. And he was like, high five. So I check my phone, I get in my car, and it's Dr. Victoria Flores, and she says, hey, Stu's on call. He's officially your doctor. It was probably like 6:30, I think. I don't really remember. And I'm like, oh, do I tell her that I might be in labor right now? Maybe she should wait a minute. And I didn't because I know because I've been having these feelings for a while and maybe it'll go away. Who knows? So I get home and I'm trying to just ignore it. I'm cleaning my bathroom because that's probably where I'm going to be for a while. And I'm like, I'm just going to go to sleep because, you're supposed to like rest before labor so you can have all your energy. And so I go to my bed and I'm in there. And I'm like, no, this isn't working. I'm not going to be able to rest. The contractions are getting stronger and I'm definitely feeling like I'm in labor. And I tell my team, I'm like, guys, I think I'm in labor. I don't remember what time it was at this point, maybe 9 or 10. One of my friends who's coming as another doula, she's 2 hours away. So she comes over or starts leaving her house and she gets to my house around midnight. And she's with me and she's pushing on my back. And I think it's starting to go very quickly. And I'm on my couch at one point and my water breaks. And it's like this pop and then a pop. And I was first flew off the couch because I just bought it. And then I was scared for a moment because I was very in tune with what I was feeling. If I had a new sensation, I was checking with myself. Have I felt that kind of pain before? Yes, I have. You're fine. Keep going. But my water breaking, I've never felt that before. So I had no idea what was happening. I mean, I knew with my water breaking, but could I have ruptured? I don't know. Is that what it feels like? I don't know. We went to the toilet. I think by that time Anastasia had gotten there, or just I was sitting on the toilet And all I know is Anastasia's in my face and my other girlfriend's in my face. And I was crying. And I said, you guys, I like, what if I rupture? And I always butcher Anastasia's words, but she just kind of like stared at me and she was just like, listen, everything's going normal. Everything's progressing as it should be. Like you're like, you're tracking. It's not like it's off this pattern and like you're doing great. And I was like, okay. And then the thought, I just put it away. It wasn't ruptured and I'm fine. I'm gonna keep going. Um, there was meconium in my water, and that was perfectly normal because that's what happens with breech babies. So we're still in the toilet and we're doctors on the phone and I'm gonna move into the tub. The water's not filled, so I think I just laid on Anastasia's lap for like a long time and just labored there for a while. Eventually, I got into the tub. The doctor had got in there. They did a cervical check to see how I was doing. My first time being in labor, who knows? Like, what if I was not dilating at all? And I don't know. But I was complete and I think, at a 7 centimeters. And so he's like, great, keep going. And so he went to bed and I got in the pool. And um, I think my shoulders did this little thing and I grunted and Anastasia's like, oh, we're getting pushy. And there's toes coming out. And so she gets the doctor and he's like, okay, we're getting close. And so they're all just kind of waiting and patiently. And I'm in the pool. And then I think I changed positions and she's got 2 feet coming out now, her legs. And I am like, okay, I'm ready. And I rotate and I get on all fours and I'm pushing her. And I think she gets to like her belly button, a little bit past her belly button. And the cord starts to lose fullness and color. So Stu's like, let's get her out a little sooner. So he helps me up and he told me to go to the couch, but there was no way I was gonna walk to the couch with a dangling baby. I mean, I was right here in my living room. The couch is not that far, but I was not gonna like move. So I just stood up and I just gave it everything I had. I think he pulled her arms out and then gave her a little shoulder press, and she was out within minutes. Um, and that was my story. Puts it through my legs and I'm trying to reach for her, but he's like, no, you gotta get your leg over the cord. And so I like get my leg over the cord and I bring her to my chest. And I think the hardest part in that moment is I remember apologizing to her. And my friend's like, why are you apologizing? Like, you just brought her into this world. Like, you just did a great job. I was like, but I don't think anybody understood that I wasn't allowing myself yet to connect with her. She was a little floppy, so she needed some, I don't even want to say support because nobody did anything. We rubbed her a little bit and patted her back and she was fine. And I knew what she needed, but I couldn't give it to her. I had a block because I was waiting for somebody to take her from me. I didn't believe that I could keep her. So I was holding her and I'm like, I know she's gonna be fine. I know she's gonna be fine. Stewie gives her a little pat on the back. And then she starts crying and everything's great. And he kind of comes over to me and he pats me on the head and he's like, you did it. You did it. And I just squeezed her a little tighter and just lost it because I knew in that moment, like, no, she's not going anywhere. Like I get to hold her like we are in my home and she's here and they'll wait till me to like let her go. And that's like a Mariah's telling her story of like being able to hold her baby. It's like I know exactly what that feels like, whether it was born vaginally or a C-section, like you having that ability to hold your baby. Oh, it's just so healing. Um, and that, I mean, I guess that's it.
No, that's not it. That is wonderful. That is great. And so now that you've had this experience, what would you tell your younger self?
That's a hard one. And I've thought about that question for a long time because my younger self didn't have access to the internet the way we do now. It wasn't on our phones or our computer. Like I used it at school. But my younger self would have done a little bit better at educating myself somehow. But quite honestly, when I think about it, the doctor should have been more educated. Our system is broken. It doesn't teach
It
vaginal
is.
birth anymore.
No,
It doesn't
it
teach
doesn't.
physiological birth anymore. Like that's what's really the problem is that we need doctors who are actually skilled in all ways of vaginal delivery, and supporting a natural progress of labor and not going to induction or scaring us into one direction or another, and which takes a lot of education, I think, on both of our ends. um, us moms to know what to expect and how to navigate and how to question and how to push back. But also the doctors need to be more responsible. And instead of scaring the life and daylights out of me that my baby's gonna die, like you should have just told me, hey, I don't have the skills, so I can't support you, but this doctor can. Instead, you scared the crap out of me and then told me that maybe this guy could help you. Like that was wrong. So my advice to myself is, yes, educate yourself more, but also I want to put a lot of the responsibility on these people, these professionals who are supposed to know better, need to do better.
Definitely need to do better. Sorry.
I'm gonna pull one more question out of Raquel because I know the story, which is, Raquel, can you tell the difference though between the first doctor and the second doctor and how they approached breech? Because your second doctor didn't have the skills either, not because for lack of desire, but because it was not available to her when she went to school. But how did she approach that conversation with you? Because you were asking for something that was not the norm.
We mean with Dr.
You
Victor.
were, yeah, because you were gonna go do something that was outside of normal.
Yeah, that was hard. Because I knew like Stu teaches breech worldwide. You know, my confidence in his skill was, there was no question ever at any point. And so for her, it took me some time, like, and I think too, it was like, well, Stu trusts her, so I can trust her. So that helped a lot. But with her, it was just talking and really kind of building the connection and a comfort with her that helped me to relax. So I think definitely having a good relationship with your provider was key. Ultimately, she wasn't the one that was there. So it was all kind of thrown out the window anyways. But um, yeah, building that confidence in her and our relationship more than her skills was, I think, important for me to be able to feel confident in my decision, whether she was there or whether Stu was there. Is that what, was that your
I was
question?
asking more like, was she encouraging or fearful? Like, did she avoid the
Oh no,
fear or
she
did
was
she?
so excited. She was so excited for what we were gonna attempt to do. Super supportive, never at once, you know, question anything that I was trying to attempt or made me worry. It was all confidence, all good news, I guess.
That's great that you felt supported. uh, Anastasia, do you want to go ahead and tell your story now? Because
Sure.
he's telling his story.
Yep, you bounce. I will tell mine as quickly as I can. I too was a younger mom. I was married. Actually, Raquel and I have we are birthday twins and we have baby girl birthday twins too. So funny little fact about the two of us. So I was young but married, and I felt like I knew a fair amount of about birth, and I like went into my pregnancies pretty confident. I too, I've heard this a couple times now, chose a CNM that was like, at a clinic and was like, okay, well, we're young, we don't have a lot of money, but my insurance will cover this, and it's a midwife, so I'm gonna get like midwifery care and it'll be great. And honestly, for my pregnancy, it was totally fine and uneventful and super supportive. And I said, I don't want an epidural. Okay, great. Like, I don't want any interventions. I don't feel like that test. Okay, fine. Like, it was all fine and wonderful. And then just like life, sometimes things happen and they throw you for a loop. So uh, my first baby was, due in the summer, and it was middle of July, and we lived in an upstairs apartment and it was very hot. And I was very pregnant. So I was extra hot, anyone who's been pregnant in the summer. And I had like a tank top on and underwear. This is a funny thing to say for everyone to hear recording, but I was hot. And I was like checking my email before I went to bed. So my husband was, like in our room and not right next to me. And I felt this warm wetness. And I thought, oh, this must be what they're talking about when they say sometimes you pee accidentally at the end of pregnancy, but I put my hand down and there was blood all over my hand and it was actually bleeding. And so definitely freaked out, but that calm freak out where you like don't actually have emotion, I literally just called my husband's name and he didn't come right away. And so then I said it louder. And by the time he came, I met him. So I was like standing up and he was like coming towards me and there was enough blood that it was going down my legs. So not something like that you stay home for. So we went to the hospital and the doctor who actually met me was very kind and not alarmist. So I was really thankful for that. The nurses were even trying to not be alarming when I came in. They were like, well, sometimes you bleed. It's okay. Like, it's okay. And then we went into the bathroom together and I took my pants off and she was like, okay, that's a little more than when I said that, what I was thinking. And I'm like, okay. She's like, okay, well, let's change and let's just put the baby on first to start, right? So she did, and the baby was fine, like as if nothing in the world was going on and the rest of the world was freaking out, but her little heart rate was just like like nothing was happening. And the doctor then came in and was totally calm too and just said, didn't love that, but your baby looks great. So why don't you just go to sleep and we'll monitor the baby overnight and we'll talk in the morning. But things I wasn't ready for it's a practice. So that doctor went off at 7 a.m. and a different doctor came in with a very different energy. And she was so fearful and you could tell, and this could be happening and that could be happening. And at this point, the bleeding slowed to almost nothing. And my baby's been fine all night long and is still fine. And she says, oh, the placenta and all these things. And so we should induce you. And, my very like, just confident, this is all I know. I looked at her and I said, well, if we have to induce, then can I try to get it going naturally? And she goes, well, what are you going to do? Have sex? And I said, sure, go out and close the door. And she said, no, you're not. And I shrunk. So anyone who knows me knows I'm pretty feisty, but in that moment, I just was like, oh, okay. And that was kind of it. A radial or an ultrasound person like came in to do an ultrasound and to check on things. And I was like trying to look at my baby, here I had been scared all night and I was like, can you turn the screen towards me? And they were like, no. And I'm like, I just want to see my baby. So I was like craning my neck, like, like lying sideways, just trying to like see my baby. Um, Needless to say, they started induction. It was like, it's the story of everyone. It's the cascade of interventions, went on for a super long time. I'd gotten to, 36 hours of being in labor with no epidural, opted for an epidural in hopes that maybe it would help. It did not, had a C-section, didn't get a lot of like information afterwards. My baby came to me afterwards. I took her hat off and I was like, what is this? There was like a little scab on her head, like kind of going into the very little hair that was on her. And then a nurse had to go look at my chart and she goes, oh, she got nicked in a C-section. And I'm like, no one said anything to me. Like no one thought to tell me this happened. So I just like discovered it on my own. The positive was that where I lived, VBAC was super common, very normal. And so when I was everyone knew I wanted more kit. Like people knew me. It's a pretty small town, not super tiny, but like small enough that you run into people at the grocery store in Santa Cruz. And so I knew some of the nurses even, and they were like, it's okay. You can have a VBAC. Like, don't, this is not the end of your story kind of a thing. So it was actually like encouraged. So I go on, get pregnant again. And it's not a question. No one questions it. No one says anything. Everyone's just like, cool. Okay. That's what we're doing. And you're young and healthy. We're just dealing with the pregnancy right now. Like we're not worried about anything else or thinking about anything else. So we keep going and, then
Were
I
you able to find VBAC supportive providers?
Oh yeah, no one even blinked. They were just like, "Yep, have a VBAC." Like, cool, we're here. Like it was just treated as if it was a normal birth. I think I signed a VBAC consent form, but it was just kind of handed to me like, "Hey, you got to sign this thing." But like there was no fear. There were no absolutely no fear. I hired a doula. I was like, I'm going to do this different. I know what my rights are, kind of a thing. So I went in and I had like kind of I had like one day where I thought I was in labor and then got to the hospital and the contractions faded away. My doctor was amazing. She was like, well, you have a choice. I could give you some Pitocin and it'll probably keep going because you're after 40 weeks, or you can go home. Like, it's totally up to you. I don't really have like a strong anything about this. Like, whatever you want to do is fine. Those are your two options on the table. Get some Pitocin or go home. And I was like, I should probably just go home. She's like, okay, great. I'll fill out the thing. You can go home. So I went home, eventually then went into labor. My water broke actually, and went into the hospital. I didn't like the nurse upon arrival very much. So I was like, I know my voice. And I was like, I want a different nurse. She's not going to be my nurse. And they quickly switched out the nurse and gave me somebody new. I was just like, I'm not putting up with anything. I don't want to. Labored for a long time. Things kind of kept going. I actually didn't have the greatest experience with my doula, which was so sad because I got to a place where I was describing what I felt happening in my body, and she just kind of told me to breathe instead of like helping me to fix what was happening. And that was rough. And then I ended up getting an epidural after that because I kind of just felt like no one was really helping me. So got an epidural and basically ended up in a situation where we'd been in labor for a long time. And the doctor just said, okay, like, I think it's time to go back. At this point, I've had 3 doctors, I think, in labor at that point. And so this is the 3rd one. But she was notorious for being like the VBAC queen doctor. Like she had a 90% success rate. So she did my C-section, but here was the big difference. She came to my bedside afterwards and she said, I know you wanted that so badly. And I just want to tell you what I saw when I went to go get her out. And she described to me what position she was in and that she was trying to come out of my hip and was like totally asynclitic to one side. And she said that feeling that you were feeling, that you were describing, was so true. And this is what it was. And it literally made all the difference in the world. So I think just like, I know what my questions are because I wrote them, so I will answer my own. But when I look back and think like, what advice would I give, or what advice do I give my daughters? My daughters are 8, my oldest daughters are 18 and 16. It's, hey, like you have a voice, trust your intuition. And don't let people tell you you're not feeling something that you're feeling. And everyone should talk to you. There's always time to tell you what's going on, like even in an emergency. And that's something I've learned over the years working with some amazing care providers where I've been in emergency situations with them and I've seen them pause to take the minute to look at someone in the eyes and say, this is an actual real emergency, but I'm going to tell you right now what's going on as fast as I can get it out of my mouth. And I want you to see me eye to eye when I'm telling you this.
That's something that you can add to your birth plan. Absolutely.
Yes.
That communication, something that whenever something is going on, you want to be communicated with. You want to be told before they make that incision what is going to happen, what they're seeing, why they're doing what they're doing, because it's so important to be connected in that moment, like Anastasia was.
Yeah. So anyways, that's my story. And then here I am just advocating so many years later for women to just be heard and whatever their choice is.
Thank you so much. And
After
see
all of
where
that.
you are.
Yeah.
President, thank you so much. We do have one question, and I encourage everybody to go ahead and put your questions is the chat really disabled, Valerie? Then just go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and answer them as they come in. For Raquel, Dr. Stu did your home VBAC after your C-sections. I thought OBGYNs do not suggest home births after cesarean.
I'm sure hospital OBGYNs don't suggest C-sections at home. The doctor that I saw here in Ventura was not excited about my option to birth at home, but he said if it was going to be with anybody, and it's Dr. Stu, he was fine with it. But Dr. Stu is just a home birth provider, so he only does home birth, but he takes on the cases that kind of nobody else will touch if they're within reason. He has a criteria for it. And there's actually now that I'm in this, so I work now for Dr. Stu. And I produce the podcast and I work for him and Bliss. And so I'm in this world like all the time. And there's actually a lot more providers that are home birth doctors that actually support VBAC at home. Your success rate tends to be a little higher because they can support physiological birth versus like induction and which, the cascade of interventions. So the answer is yes and no. Stu, yes. Some hospital OBs would not, but that's their safety zone. That's why my was saying earlier is that our doctors who are coming out of residency aren't trained um necessarily in how to support birth, so it's a little bit more scary for them. So I think you're going to get a higher number of hospital doctors that say like that's not a good idea, where you'll have doctors who have left the system, Dr. Nathan Riley, Dr. Victoria Flores, and Dr. Stu. Oh, I always forget the other guy's name. Dennis, no, not Dennis, not David. What's his name? Anastasia. David Hayes all left the system and now work for home only. So yes, they're out there. Oh, and I guess because in California, so the midwives also support VBACs more often than doctors at home. In California, though, it's against the midwifery law to support breech delivery at home. So I could have had a midwife, but because they're not allowed to do breech, then I had to go with an OB. So that was that.
How do you want me to answer the next question?
Go ahead.
It's how do you go about finding a home birth OBGYN? As you could tell, Raquel listed them off very quickly. In the United States, the answer for other places, I'm not so sure. But really, usually your best bet is to ask the doulas in your area and the midwives in your area that support home birth, and they will usually know if there is one, who they are. It's kind of your best bet for honestly getting a gauge for anything. So even like hospital doctors, and if there's how supportive they actually are for VBACs, all the things. In that regard, I would go to the midwives and the doulas, and they usually know the answer.
Absolutely. And you don't really have to be confined to your local area. You can also, fly somewhere else, stay in a hotel. I mean, there are lots of options. If the providers near you don't offer what you want, you can go farther out. It's a sad state that we have to do that. But it is a possibility. If it's something that you really want, don't stop yourself just because of borders of counties or cities. Did any of you have any complications or unique scenarios with your first uterine incision, like a single closure versus double, or extensions to your incision?
My incision opened up 2 weeks later, I think it was, with my second. I sat down to go to the bathroom and there was blood all over the top of my legs, which obviously wasn't coming from where blood's supposed to come from at 2 weeks. I think I chatted Diana, but it just turns out that it was just a closure wasn't happening right or something, but that was scary for a moment, but
Was
that was
that
it.
internal or external, the incision?
Both. But
Oh,
it was
okay.
the external incision that was bleeding, but it was coming from like internal, like you could see in. It was really weird. Um, but they think there was just like scar tissue there from my previous that had built up, and it was just taking a longer time to heal. And then I had 3 kids. It wasn't like I was sitting on the couch, relaxing either. So it wasn't getting just, that time to heal. But he re-stitched it and then just let it kind of breathe, because he said whatever was in there needed to work its way out as well, because closing in could cause infection as well. So it did end up healing, but it just took a little bit longer.
Another question, any book recommendations for someone going for VBAC after 2 C-sections?
I mean, I tell everyone Ina May's Guide to Childbirth, for the positive birth stories in it, is like probably the best starting point. Just from being immersed and living in a world of fear, it's super helpful. So, yeah.
I think there's benefit also to reading the negatives and like not to say that you shouldn't read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. Definitely do that, but also be prepared with all the stories that are online. Like in our group, read all the things that can possibly go wrong, so that when a provider is talking to you, that maybe they're doing something out of their convenience rather than what is best for you and baby. I mean, if we know better, we do better. But we don't know unless we've read it or heard it. And so I also think you should go out into the world and share your story so that other people can hear and not, make the same mistakes that you did. Raquel?
Taking an out of hospital birth class, I think, is also key to kind of help you, especially like if you have a doula who's teaching it, because they know the hospital system. So not only can they teach you about like physiological birth and what to expect and remedies to help you cope with pain and everything that goes along with it, is that they can also talk to you about hospital options and let you know like what they'll offer, when they'll offer, and anybody who can tell you about induction and the high rates of induction and when and why you may or may not actually need an induction, I think isn't super important.
Thank you for joining us today. If you'd like to ask more questions or read lots more stories, feel free to join us on Facebook.